All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. We're back on the chairs and the couch, but it's not two dudes on a couch anymore.
We did. What's the game you used to play when you had like so many chairs and you played music?
Musical chairs.
Is that what's called musical? Oh. How about musical chairs?
Game.
When you have the
music
chairs
and music.
when you have the
music.
music.
Yeah, what do you call that?
One is taken away randomly.
Musical chairs.
Somebody was real creative on that.
That's a stupid name. Like whoever came up with that? That's stupid.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That one game.
Man,
Yeah.
why couldn't I have gotten a job naming games? That'd have been easy.
Right up your alley.
So creative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we decided to do a little switcheroo. Last week it was like, well, we're like I guess I kind of host it, and then you typically do most of the talking, and then we're like looking sideways. And
Well, that's true. Like you and I are sitting there having a conversation on the couch, and
Yeah.
Patty's over there in the chair. Like, hey, what's up? Hey, how you doing?
I was trying to give her the
You good
comfy
over
chair
there?
because she's the girl and has back
Yeah.
things.
Well, you
but-
were. That's
back
honor. I mean, that's. I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
But
we went for the old switcheroo this week.
no, nice.
We'll see
nice.
what happens.
So now you're in the nice chair.
Yep. Yep.
So
So
horrible. I mean, it's bad.
You know what would really help is a box of zingers right here.
No
just
doubt.
right in the middle.
What did
a
you do with your
barrier.
zingers? What did you do with your zingers that Julie gave you? Did you eat them?
What do you think?
Those are awesome. I was gonna say if you didn't bring them back,
What are zingers for?
because I would eat them for sure.
Yeah.
They're just so good.
They are good.
Well, we're recording this on Monday, which means tomorrow is election day, and it'll be posted on Wednesday. So, do you
Yep.
have any? I don't even know what we would say at this point. Will we know by Wednesday? I guess we will.
Depends.
Probably not.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just on kind of what they're saying, I would say probably not. But you would hope so. But I mean,
Yeah.
like 4 years ago, you thought you knew what it was, and woke up the next morning and was like, "Oops, different."
Yeah.
So I know I did hear something this morning on the news that said that all the early voting tabulations have to be turned in by 8:00 tonight, maybe, or something
okay.
like that. So they're wanting to try to get all that in early, so it's not another one of those, later things that pops up, because evidently there were a lot of people who voted early this year
Yeah.
as compared to the last time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The whole early voting thing. That's I asked, like, early voting to me seems like a pre-register for something. Like you pay for something extra, so you get early privilege to vote.
yeah,
But it's just like anybody can do it. So what?
absolutely.
So what's like? Why not just call it voting? Like you got voting period.
That's a really good question.
Like instead of early voting and voting day, it should just be
but no,
maybe
I guess the first
voting and late
No,
voting.
It's not the first Tuesday in November, is it? No, I guess it is. Because so the first Tuesday in November is always. And why
Voting
is that?
day.
Why is that the day you vote? Why
Yeah.
is it not a Wednesday or a Thursday?
Sure.
Like I don't know what's up with that. But,
Yeah. Interesting.
maybe
Well, do
we
you
should
have
know.
any hope to give our people who are, maybe we know by Wednesday, maybe we're still waiting to hear, maybe the world's in chaos, who knows? But do you have any words of hope to record and maybe even tell yourself on Wednesday?
Yeah. Well, I think just like we said Sunday morning, I mean, this really doesn't affect or change, regardless of what happens on Tuesday.
Yep.
This doesn't affect who we are, and it doesn't affect kind of our purpose here and what we're doing. I mean, we're here under the rule of our King, which is Jesus, and He's called us to be good citizens in the countries that we happen to live in. We just happen to live in the United States of America
Yeah.
that votes on a leader every 4 years.
Yeah.
And so that leader of that country, if you look at it from a biblical perspective, that leader of that country, yes, it affects us as citizens of this country, but we've got to remember we're citizens of another country. So our king, our leader, never changes office.
Yeah.
Right? Never gets out of his throne. He's always on his throne, will always be on his throne. So as far as we're concerned, as citizens of heaven, man, we're good. Now, we live here as long as we're alive. And so in that context, we have to deal with what happens in the conditions of the country we happen to live in. Think about it this way. Like there are believers that are citizens of heaven, just like we are, that are all over the world, that don't have the same political system
Right.
that the country that we live in does.
Yeah.
So some, under dictatorial rule, some under regime, some under, kings and queen type, like all different kinds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're not, we just happen to be citizens of heaven who happen to live in the United States of America.
Right.
And so as we think about being ambassadors to this country for Jesus, we just have to, realize that it could go either way. And man, we have the privilege to vote and to try to affect that. But at the end of the day, God's going to put whoever he wants in that office for his purpose.
Yeah.
It's like I told the deacons last night in our deacons meeting, we know that the scripture says that toward the end, things get worse, but before they get better.
Yeah.
And so whoever, and God puts in those offices who he wants according to his will. And so we don't know what his will is, but that's why we always pray. We always pray what we feel like is right and what our heart wants to see, but we always tag on the end of that, but not my will, but thine be done. Mm-hmm. Because we don't know in a particular situation where we are on the prophetic calendar and what God's doing.
Right.
So, we always want to say, God, as far as I can see and I'm concerned, this seems like the best path.
Yeah.
But not my will, but thine be done. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's it. I think we exercise, hopefully, that when people listen to this on Wednesday, they've exercised their God-given right to vote. And I say it's a God-given right. We say, well, how can you say it's a God-given right? Because people in countries that are dictatorial don't have a God-given right to vote, but we do. Mm-hmm. Well, we live in the United States of America in a constitutional society that does give us the right to vote.
Right.
So, for us, God has allowed us that privilege.
Yeah.
So if he's allowed us that privilege, then we should exercise that. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy to think that when you look at it this way, if we are truly ambassadors living in a foreign country, in a foreign land, then how many people that live in other countries, but they're not citizens of that country, actually get to affect their government.
True.
Right. So God's given us a great privilege, in that we as ambassadors for Christ who belong to a different country, a different land, get to be here and get to participate in what's happening.
Yeah.
So we do that, and I think we exercise that, and hopefully we have done that, and then we just trust God with whatever happens.
Absolutely. Yep. It ain't about the blue donkey or the red elephant. It's about the lamb that was slain.
Hallelujah.
That's right. The Lion of Judah.
Hallelujah.
Some people may also ask, I've heard some of the, and you're allowed to just say no and we'll move on, but heard some of the other pastors in the area that have had, or just around the world right now with all this, that give their political stance and tell their people who to vote for. I know you've mentioned those kind of things in the past, but why don't you put those kind of things in your message or preach a message directly on who we should vote for and all down those lines?
I think people do that. I think there are a lot of people who, I think some people, I don't know, preachers are different.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's some preachers who kind of follow culture and kind of use culture as their springboard into whatever their message is going to be. And they really want to kind of attack that kind of thing. And that's fine. And some people really want to attack the political, military, American culture scene. That's fine, whatever. That's just not, the flavor of expository preaching and preaching through books of the Bible tend to be a lot. It's just more discipleship based. I want our people, and I think we're finally beginning to see this, like it's coming around, that like you want people to change individually. And so when they change individually, then their homes start changing. Yeah. When their homes change, then the friends around them change. Then you get enough homes to change. Now you're impacting change in the right way. Yeah. So it's not sensationalized or anything like that. But I know even several local guys have preached political sermons, and I was just reading today. Eric Reed at The Journey did a really good message on a Christian. I don't know if it was called A Christian's Responsibility or Right to Vote, but I was reading through his transcript, and what he preached was great, and I would have preached the same thing. He just did a really good job with, man. Here's really the privilege to vote and our opportunity to, and really obligation to vote, because God's given us the opportunity to do that. Yeah. And I think I've tried to push that. When I talk about it, I push, hey, listen, we have an opportunity to participate in this. If God's giving us that opportunity, then we should do that. I've never felt like it's my job to tell people who to vote for. I think that's again, individuals. We've got to look at a situation and we've got to vote for somebody who we feel like represents the causes and the things that we believe in.
Right.
And I do think those should be based on our Christian principles and Christian values.
Yeah.
And there's so many conversations about, man, we're not electing a moral leader. We're not electing this. We're not electing this. Yeah. And it's not that I don't disagree with that, because you're really not. But at the same time, you got to look at a person's character and realize that, regardless of what side of the aisle it is, man, if I know there's a major character flaw in somebody's life, that's going to show up somewhere else. Mm. Like, we just don't isolate those things in our lives. And so, there's a lot, and that comment's not geared toward one side of the aisle or the other. That's just a general comment that we all have to, be aware of. And so it's, I don't know, man, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
I've never dove into hardcore. Like, I enjoy listening to people online and stuff that are really into politics and really get the system. And there's so much of the system I've never gotten into and to understand a lot, but it's been fun for me to watch different guys like Jim Jordan and others who, like Jim Jordan, man, from Ohio, is doing a great job in I don't know if it's the Senate or House of Representatives, but I think it's House of Representatives. But he was a former wrestler, national champ, and that dude's just got the cauliflower. He's up here with cauliflower ears, giving his speeches, and I'm like, dude, that's my man.
Yeah.
But he's got a great fire about him, very conservative, and it's been fun to watch guys like that get in there and kind of battle in that ring, kind of a different environment.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah,
I would just say, don't lose hope, man. Like, Wednesday comes, and you know what? It's just another day. Jesus, and I hate to sound so, Jesus is king, because it kind of has that cliche of sound, but. At the end of the day, nothing changes for us.
Right.
The world becomes a little tougher or a little easier or whatever it is. But, man, at the end of the day, I wake up Wednesday and it's kind of the same.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Well, kind of getting into the message, what was this, number
8?
8. Yeah. So 2 more after this in the 10 Commandments. Message title is, there a thief in the house, so do not steal.
You got 2 more chances to see if you have any innocence in the 10 Commandments.
So on that note, I think you mentioned that last week, and then at the beginning of your message that people were asking, like, are we ever going to get one that we're not guilty of?
I walked into coffee, and Mary was like, dude, are you ever going to get to one I'm not guilty of? I'm like, nope, because that's the beauty of the law.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've really enjoyed preaching through this series is, and didn't anticipate it when we talked about it, like I didn't see this coming, so to speak, but it really, like, the law really jumps off the page and does its job. And when you preach the law, man, you realize how guilty we are. And our tendency is to try to find some innocence. And I think that's what's always bugged me about the 10 Commandments and people's interpretation of the 10 Commandments. Is we always try to interpret them so that there's a glimmer of hope that we can be innocent, Yes. So this really doesn't mean this, and it really doesn't mean this, and so I'm good.
Yeah.
But if you really just dig into it, like Jesus did that in the Sermon on the Mount, and he took it to a much deeper level, because that's what the Pharisees were doing.
Yeah.
Like, they wanted to show they were innocent of the 10 Commandments, and Jesus was like, yeah, you're not. Mm-hmm. None of them.
Yep.
And so. I think that's the beauty of it is, man, I mean, obviously we don't want to be violators of the 10 Commandments, but the reality is that we are, because that's just who we are.
Yep.
Our flesh will violate every single one of them every chance it gets.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully we walk out of there realizing, wow, I really am a sinner, and I need a Savior. I think we know we need a Savior, hopefully, but I think most of us think we need a Savior because we're going to die one day, and we want to make sure that's taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of, obviously, our spiritual life. Mm-hmm. But my goodness, that's just the beginning of it.
Yeah.
That's just the benefit of knowing Jesus.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, what would you say? And you mentioned this to start on Sunday, but obviously Jesus came to fulfill the law. So we rest in Jesus. We know that we're seen through His righteousness. As believers in Him, followers of Him. So what's the purpose of the law for us today? Obviously, we're not held to that. Yeah. Like, we're not going to keep them all.
That's right.
We're guilty of all of them. So what's the purpose of the law for us?
Yeah, I still think, because if you remember what Jesus said in Matthew, He said, I've not come to abolish it, but to fulfill it. Okay, so he fulfills it, meaning he fulfills the righteous religious, or not the righteous obligation that is there in the law, and so he fulfills that. He met the righteous standard where we can't. So the only way he could become the sacrifice, the lamb that was slain, the perfect sacrifice, is that he had no sin. Well, the only way to have no sin is to fulfill all the law.
Right.
Because if you break one, you've broken them all.
Yeah.
Right. So he did that. And then he became the sacrifice for our sin. I think it's such a cool concept. I read several weeks ago that, one author said, if Jesus had committed a sin, he would have had to have died for his sin. And if he died for his sin, he couldn't have died for ours too.
Wow.
So why it's so important that he was sinless is that he could then die for all sin and not just his. Because he had no personal responsibility to sin.
Yeah.
Other than him being our sacrifice, right? Substitutionary atonement. But I do think that like the purpose of the law today for us is still that great instruction. Man, there's so much good instruction. Just like yesterday, when you look at and when you get into like the whole idea of, don't steal from someone, but pay them what they're worth. Like what a great business principle. And man, be godly. And here's how you're a godly business person, right? So I think it's those principles that still have incredible value for us. And if we'll realize that and not skip Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we want to go from Genesis to Judges, right? Because Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, that's just the law, man. Who wants to read the law?
Yeah.
But there's just a ton of value and good instruction, great instruction for us in the law still.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we did get a few questions this week. Not as many as the last few weeks. Few weeks we've had a bunch, but still got some great questions. So thank you all for continuing to submit those. That's I think we would all agree that we'd rather answer questions and talk about things that you guys want to talk about than just us coming up with stuff to dig
Absolutely.
deeper. Thank you guys for submitting those. The first one they asked, how do you justify missionaries asking for financial support when honest work is working to support ourselves rather than expecting others to support us? That's a pretty deep,
man.
Deep question.
That's a great question. Patty, what do you think about that?
Honestly, I think
How'd you like that one? Boom.
First question, drop it on you.
Yeah, I want a different chair.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the ask is honorable because the result is honorable.
Yeah.
Man, look at that. Did you just come up with that, or you thought?
Absolutely.
Like you didn't think about that before?
Honestly,
you didn't read that last night and then think, man, what would be a good answer to that question?
If you,
You didn't do that?
I should have.
You should. Okay. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced you
read it.
didn't, but go ahead.
Again, another chair, please.
That was good. That was good. The ask is honorable because of the work. Is
The
honorable.
result.
Man, look at that. That's good.
Yeah.
You want to clarify on that?
Next.
Does it need clarifying?
Really,
I think it was
Cameron?
great.
Okay.
That was great.
Such a powerful question and a basic answer.
He just called me basic. He
No,
used my
did.
own word against me.
Turn
I
it
did
back
not.
on you.
I did not.
In a good way.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that?
No.
Okay.
I'm gonna be Robin Gibb. No. I think that's a great question because I think the whole idea of honest work is us not expecting someone to give us a living. I think Patty's exactly right. To me, it's more honorable because you think about this. Like I think about my good friends Don and Janet Darden. Their daughter and her husband are at Murray State, and they work for Cru, which is I don't know which organization Cru is with. It's not Disciple. It used to be Navigators. I think it
Campus
comes out of
Crusaders.
Campus Crusade. I think maybe. So anyway, so they're there at Murray State. They both work full time. They're developing a college ministry, Cru college ministry on campus. They have to completely raise all their support. I'm like, man, here's two young adults just got married, both of them. Like it's not like one works a full-time job, has benefits and all this kind of stuff, and the other is going to be a missionary on a campus. Like they both have committed their lives to just go on campus, and they're reaching great number of college kids on campus. They're leading kids to Christ in the cafeteria. Like Don and Janet will go up there and visit with them, they're like, we don't have time for you guys. We go, talk to kids about Jesus, and what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But they have to raise their own support.
Yeah.
Every year they raise their own support. So I think it really does support what you said. I think they're not asking somebody to just support them so they can sit around and do nothing. I think the work that they're doing, man, is very, very honorable, and they're just really looking for people who would invest in that. And I think it's in viewing it that way, that's an investment of someone who's giving their life to the service of the Lord. So
yeah.
It's a great example of the answer you just gave.
Yeah, for sure. And you think about like even our short-term mission trips, that it's not a full-time salary by any means, but just raising that support to be able to go on those trips.
Absolutely.
Like those, I think it causes us to release our expectations. It's kind of in a way, kind of like the Sabbath conversation, like us not providing not relying on ourselves to provide those things, but allowing other people in on that mission. Because not everybody can go on every mission trip. Not every person can go to the Middle East and minister over there.
That's right.
But people still have a heart for missions and want to support that. Yeah. So them being able to give to this mission, to send somebody is just an incredible opportunity.
I think it's a way we allow people to be a part of missions. Yep. Because they can't go. Either physically they can't go, stage of life they can't go, whatever it is. But man, I can help somebody go that wants to go serve the Lord.
Yeah.
And as mission trip participants and leaders, we're just so thankful for those who are obedient to the call and the stirring that the Lord places on them.
Yep.
I committed to going on the New York trip just out of in faith, honestly, and I didn't really feel a peace about sending out support letters. I know it would have been perfectly fine. I don't think anybody would have been offended to receive one from me. But at that particular time, I just didn't feel a peace about it. And, I got on the missions portal and everything was paid. So there were people that knew and supported the effort of sharing the gospel in Jamaica, New York. And so whoever you are, thank you so much.
It's awesome.
And just been able to, again, witness and walk through salvation with someone who was so desperately lost. Every penny was used for God's work and for God's glory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the end result was honorable.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think something else that supports that I think I got into a little bit later in the message, but when you look at the model of Israel, the Levitical tribe was supported by the other 11 tribes.
Yeah.
So the Levitical tribe, like their job, that they were set apart to do the work of the temple. So all the sacrificial work and they did God's work in the temple. So they represented for all the other 11 tribes, they represented those people to God.
Yeah.
Okay. So a prophet would be God's person to the people. The priest were God's representative people, the people's representative to God. Okay, so you had the Levitical tribe doing the work of God in the temple. They didn't get an allotment of land, nor were they to go out and work the land. All the other 11 tribes were supposed to bring their tithe into the storehouse. And so the grain and all that they brought into the storehouse, which was at the temple, was used to support the Levites. So that the Levites, just like you just said, could focus solely on doing the work of the Lord and not having to worry about going out and growing their food just like everybody else did.
Yeah.
So there was a purpose. God had a system in place, and there was a purpose for that. So even the Levites didn't. The other people supported them, but they were doing God's work.
Yeah.
And so there's a pretty cool pattern there too, or a picture of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And the way God set up that system early on.
That's awesome. Next question, they ask, can you advocate to be paid more when you oftentimes work or do more than you're paid for? Example, teachers advocating for higher pay. So yeah, kind of along those same lines of maybe they're working harder than others, going that extra mile that you're talking about, but not getting paid what they probably deserve to be paid. Can we, or should we as Christians, are we able to advocate for more pay in those situations? Yeah,
man, like when I read that, I'm like, man, that's a great question, because now I've got, 2 of my kids are school teachers.
Yeah.
And I look at what school teachers get paid and like kind of where they start and kind of that path. And man, you think to yourself, like in my mind, just looking at our culture, I think school teachers, policemen, firemen, EMT, those types of people who put their life on the line, care for us, educate our kids, like should be some of the highest paid people in our community, not the lowest paid people in our community.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard. You know, like I would say, for example, like just in general, I would say to my kids, hey, listen, if you want to get paid more money, make yourself more valuable. You know, work hard, outwork everybody else. Make somebody look at you and say, man, you're such a valuable employee. I can't do without you. Okay, so make yourself valuable, you know. So that works, but that really doesn't work in the school system, right? Because when you're and I could be wrong there by saying that. My perception is that when you're in a job where your salaries are set by a government and not by an individual business owner, you know, you could have a principle that says, man, I would really like to be able to bless you in this way because of your effort, but we've got agreed upon scales and we can only, you know, you can only do so much and things of that nature. So I think that's a different world. I think anything you can do to, and you know, the whole idea of fighting for more pay, I think when you advocate, I think any of us, I would advocate for that teachers get paid more because they're educating our children, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
You know, because again, when you're paid in a system like that, that's kind of government driven, you almost had to advocate the government, or if you're not advocating and people aren't advocating for those people to get paid more, it's the citizens that advocate that helps change the government.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the voice that you have that you can be a part of that. Yeah. And then there's a change that blesses everybody.
Right.
Right. In an individual business, I would say, man, it's just the principle I've always told my kids and I've kind of believed in. Man, just make yourself valuable. You know, I remember I had when I ran a ministry in North Carolina, and we were right on the edge of Southeastern's campus, just outside of where they were in Wake Forest, and so we would have seminary students come and work with us, and they would ask me, man, could this turn into a full-time job? And my answer to always them was, that's up to you. That's not up to me. So can you make yourself so valuable that when you're done with seminary, I have to figure out how to keep you?
Yeah.
So yeah, of course it can. That's on you. Like you've got to show me that you're so valuable that I need to figure out how to make that a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I've just kind of always, you know, gone with that because I think people who are willing to come in and do that and work hard, hard work never hurts you.
Yeah.
It never hurts you.
Yeah.
You know, now I will say this. I've always taken the posture in ministry. Well, let me ask you guys this, because you guys are in ministry positions. Well, I don't know if we can call you a minister, but I view you as a minister. So anyway, Pastor Patty. Pastor Patty.
Ministers.
Minister Patty. Minister of Communications.
Keep digging.
Yeah, right. I know, right?
What else you got?
Yeah, what else you got? Yeah. Load them up. Put them in the chamber. Like, should we advocate for ourselves when it comes to salary increases? If we truly believe that, man, we're in a position where God's caring for us, God's taking care of us, you know, et cetera and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never negotiated my salary in a job.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's just not being smart on my part, but my role, like I've always viewed, like when you're a senior, like when you're a pastor, I remember, I think I've told you guys this story when I was a youth pastor in seminary, and there was a minister that came into a church I was serving in, and he came there when I came, and he left before I left, and I remember he didn't really have a start date because he kept negotiating back and forth. So finally agreed, and then he came. Didn't last very long, and I'll never forget the deacons having a meeting about him, about what they were going to do as he went out the door. And an older gentleman stood up and said he negotiated when he came in. He's trying to negotiate when he goes out. I say give him a handshake and send him out the door. And I just thought, wow, but there was something about that didn't feel right in the church. It didn't sit right, and so I think that's a two-sided coin. I think churches have to be responsible to do the right thing, to pay people what they're worth, to pay people what market value is for your area, to realize, where the standard of, living is in your different areas and things of that nature. All that's different. Like, you've got to have a team of people that are looking at that. And I think we do, seeing that, responding to that, and creating, salary structure that's applicable to kind of everybody else in the industry. Right. So prayerfully, if you have that, then you're good. You can trust, man, that God's going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And I think we have a little bit more responsibility in that than I think probably other people who just kind of work secular jobs. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I for my parents, the way I was raised, I think it was very similar to what you're talking about with your kids, that, make yourself valuable, work hard. And my dad's mentality with me, and even when we moved here, one of the questions you asked me is like, what do you need to that's going to set you up to be able to, make what you were making in North Carolina, whatever. When North Carolina, I was working at Chick-fil-A part-time and in seminary. Like, I was like, I don't know. And my dad, I remember him telling me, like, just, let them decide. Right. And you forced me to give you a number, and I don't even remember what it was. It was very low. I didn't know anything about salary or anything.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, dude, that's too low. Yeah. That's like, that ain't going to work, bro. You're going to be working at Chick-fil-A again.
Right. But yeah, his mentality's always just been like, whatever they pay you, they'll pay you. Make yourself valuable, and God will take care of it. So that's always been the way that I've kind of functioned and been able to model after. And it comes back to, I think it's partially from baseball and some of that too, with Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men. And so, regardless of what job or what I'm doing, that's just always been my mentality. I don't know.
I've never found that if you go into a situation and work hard, that somebody's not going to be there fighting for you. Like, I've always seen that. I've always experienced that. And I think, when you're working hard, doing your job, getting after it, man, people are going to fight for you. Yeah. And it may not be, I think one of the things that we all realize and accept is, in our roles that we're in, you've got, like, the secular world has a standard, and I think the church world has and I don't think, like, I think if we were in different roles in the world, we may get paid more than if we were in the church. Right? But the reality is that this is what we sign up for. Right. Like, we know that we commit ourselves to work in the church, and we're going to trust that we're going to be taken care of. Right. And I think that's just a biblical principle. Yeah. Even the Old Testament, New Testament, the New Testament says the worker is worth his wages, and so, and again, I think our church does a good job with that. So I think we have people that fight for us. I know I fight for you guys. We have a great personnel team that wants that, the beauty of our personnel team in the last several years, especially, is, that view of, man, we're here to see what we can do for you, not try to keep you down. Yeah. And that's so important. Yep. And that's a cultural issue, that I want to keep pouring into our teams that say, hey, listen, I need our team, our staff team, to know they've got a team of people that are looking to what they can do for them. Yeah. They protect us, they provide for us, they're representatives of the church to us. And when you have that, you just know, man, that's a good thing, that you've got people who love you, who believe in your work. But I think the other side of that coin is do the work. Right? You make sure that you are people that are working hard, and you're creating results. That's the one thing about ministry, man. Like, it comes down to stealing. I talked about honest work. Yeah. We don't get a pass because we work for Jesus. I've been pretty. I don't know if it's hard, because I don't mean for it to be hard. I just want it to be an awareness point. Like, in the last couple of years, your all's evaluations have been basically 3 questions. Yeah. How did you move the dial for Emmanuel Baptist Church in 2024? Okay, well, I mean, that's what we're tasked to do. Right. We're tasked to move the dial for Emmanuel Baptist Church in the particular year we work in. Right. Now, Some could say, well, I'm just going to choose to move the dial for Jesus. So Cameron's going to choose to just kind of drive around town and hang out at coffee shops and drink coffee and talk to people like Jesus. Not do the job you're hired to do, just go pop around and talk to people like Jesus. Well, Jeff, I'm doing the Lord's work. And you're right. And praise God for that. But this church has hired you to do X job.
Right.
I need to know how you're moving the dial for this church in that job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so fair question. Question number 2, do you deserve a raise in 2024?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tight question, man.
I don't like that question.
I know. People get uptight with that question, man. But at the end, except for Patty. But at the end of the day, I think if, and we got to get over the false humility piece and realize that, man, at the end of the day, if I've done my job and I feel good about what I've done, and that's really the reason that I ask you guys those questions, because I want us to be thinking back, to be responsible for how we've used our time, how we've used the resources that God's given us, and did we use them for the right purpose? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, guys, we answer to the people of this church. Mm-hmm. Like, they're the ones who give their money every single week that pay our salaries. And so we have an obligation to those people as not public servants, but as servants of this church. To somebody needs to ask that question for them. Yeah. Right? They deserve that. So that I can sit up and say, man, our people, our guys, our team worked hard, moved the dial for this church, and we're moving forward and making disciples and doing these types of things. And then the simple question, how are you going to move the dial in 2025? Which is just a forward thinking, because we always have to keep remembering, man, my honest work is moving this church forward, advancing the kingdom of God. Like, that's my job. Your all's jobs. You got particular responsibilities in that with all of us. If we're not doing that as a team, we're just existing and getting paid to exist, right, then we got the wrong people. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a big part of me that drives this concept of honest work. Like, we aren't exempt, just like everybody else that goes to work and they've got a responsibility to do, and they're asked a simple question: did you do your responsibility, and how much of it did you do? Mm. And they've got quotas to meet, and they've got pressure, and they've got all of that. And why shouldn't we have that? Yeah. There was this huge movement in student ministry, especially. I'm sure it's flowed over into other areas because those people have now become other places, other staff members in churches. That you would always hear this phrase: "I will not sacrifice my family on the altar of ministry." Mm. Y'all ever heard that? You ever heard ministers say that? So it's big, huge, like, I'm not sacrificing my family on the altar of ministry. And so what they do then is they prioritize their family over their job. Mm. Now, you might say to me, well, Pastor Jeff, don't you think we should prioritize our family over our employment? Here's the reality. If you want job A, and job A calls for you to do these things, and this is what you're going to get paid to do job A, you don't get the right to come into job A and tell me the things you're not going to do, because that might impact your family. Mm. If you don't want to do that, don't take the job. Mm. But don't come into a job and then get all spiritual and say, well, I can't do that because I'm not sacrificing my family on the altar of ministry. What does that mean? Well, I'm not taking an extra night of the week away from my family. Okay. If you're not willing to accomplish your task based on what you're asked to do, then guess what? You don't get to do job A. Mm. We can't change what we do and accommodate everybody's view of what that needs to look like. Right. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. When I worked at Lifeway and I was the director of camps and events, there was a certain period of time it took a ton of my time away from my family. Mm. Right? From the middle of May to the second week in August, I was somewhere every week around the country. Mm. Because we had camps from California to Florida and everywhere in between. And so while the majority of my time was spent in the Southeast, you still had camps in, different places. And I was somewhere every single week. And I could sit home and I could complain about that and whine about that. But you know what? That was the job. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like it, don't take the job. Right. There are other jobs that you can do, and you don't have that. Yep. we want the job and we want the money, but we don't want to put the work in what it demands.
Yeah.
So I'm like, people would say, well, man, no, it's fair. Because you know what? They pay you to do that.
Yeah.
There's always a sacrifice, guys. Like, people that make more money sacrifice something.
Mm-hmm.
It's either time or but I'm telling you, there's always a trade-off.
Yep.
And, there are certain people who just settle in and go, you know what? I'm comfortable here because it allows me to do this with my family. Then that's great. Then you know what? Choose to be there, stay there. Some people have 2-income families, and most people have to now to even survive. And this housing market's ridiculous. I mean, it's just all that stuff is crazy. But right now you've got 2 people who are having to work in the home, younger families, just to survive, right? And that's part of it. Well, you're not going to go to your employer and go, yeah, I'm not coming to work tomorrow because my family needs me. Okay, well, you get time off.
Yeah.
You say like, well, that's gone. Well, no, I only need to work 4 days this week.
Yeah.
From now on. Well, you don't get to do that. Right. So anyway, all that to say, don't mean to get on that soapbox, but I think we've created this view that ministry is too demanding, and I shouldn't work hard and do what I need to do, because now let me say, the balance of that is that there was a generation of people, like Brother Owens was a great example of this. Man, that dude, like that group of men, they're gone. Like, people don't live like those guys lived.
Right.
Unbelievable. Like, my mentor was like that. Brother Owens was this way. That generation of leaders were just different.
Yeah.
They came out of a different generation. They were different people. And I mean, they were, you talking about 24/7, man. Mm-hmm. I just hear stories of Brother Owens and I'm thinking, wow, man, I couldn't even been that guy's driver. I probably would have failed in that, but it's, it's different. And I think things have gotten better from a balance standpoint. But we just have to be very careful, and there is a balance, but we have to be very careful, especially in ministry, that we think we get a pass because, we're doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
And it really should be the opposite.
Yeah.
Man, we should be exemplary in what we're willing to do for the sake of what we've been tasked to do.
Right. Yeah.
And you guys do that. You guys do that very, very well. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the whole sacrificing your family deal. Like, our family should be at a higher priority than our jobs. Sure. But for your job with Lifeway, for example, if you felt like that amount of time being gone from your family was going to be problematic, if that was a conviction of yours, like, you're not going to say, well, I'm going to take this job but not going to do this.
Right.
You're not going to take the job. You're going to do
exactly.
another job.
That's right.
I think the challenging piece too comes in because we work at a church. It's our work life, but it's also our faith. It's also our ministry outside of work as well.
Yes.
And so trying to balance that, I think for a lot of kids growing up, may or may not have liked their dad's job because like my dad worked 9-to-5 job. So like I would wait, we'd get home from school and I'd be so excited for him to get home. Sometimes 5:30. I'm like, man, why does he have to work so late? So like, as a kid, I'm like, man, I don't like his job because it takes him away from us. The challenge is, as ministers working for a church, like, if our kids feel that way about us not being with them because we're at work, while our work is also our faith. Right. And so that blurred line makes it challenging. And you see so many kids pastors' kids or whatever, that because so much time was taken away, they've got a bad taste in their mouth about church. Yep. But I think it's how it's handled as far as bringing your family in the ministry.
Boom.
Because
I was just going to jump in, but you go ahead. You're exactly right, dude.
Yeah, and I know I've got young kids, and it'll change, but I'm trying to figure out and finding ways that, like, there's obviously my job. There's that piece that I'm here at for a certain amount of time during the week. I have things to get done, but then I think for me, I kind of separate my job at Emmanuel and my church member side of Emmanuel. Yeah. And so, and that can be very challenging to do at times, but there's times where, like, I see myself as a church member. This isn't something I'm being paid for, but because I love this church and the ministry that I'm involved in, I'm here serving my church and the community for this purpose. Now, how can I bring my kids into this mission too, and train them in a way that they see the value in mobile food pantry or giving, like we just, this was partially selfish and then God caught me on it. But we've got so many stinking toys in our house.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yep.
So I hit a point, I'm like, I'm tired of cleaning up these toys every day. And like, we
You
got to
know
get
what?
rid of toys.
You're
We got
about-
way too many
hey,
toys.
You're about to have Christmas and get some more.
Exactly.
Like you need more.
Yeah. So I was ready to just
Trying
throw
to
them all
convince
away.
my family of all that. But anyway.
But Taylor reeled me back. We set some aside and we kept some, but we're getting rid of a lot of toys.
Yeah.
And initially thought of Goodwill, and then I was like, well, we could give it to the church,
Right.
or if there's some that the church can't take, so we've got the Salt and Light House.
Right.
And at first Taylor was like, well, they like these toys, this and that, and I hit a point where I was just trying to get rid of them selfishly.
Yeah.
Then I hit a point, I was like, this is a discipleship opportunity. So I just looked at the boys. I said, hey boys, like you've got 4 guitars sitting here.
Yeah.
One of them has a broken string. One of them only has one string. Like, all right, pick out your favorite guitar, and the others we're going to give to some other boys and girls that aren't able to have the toys that you have. So even those little things of like
Right.
finding ways to discipleship through that, I think it's hard to separate the ministry and the work piece, but I think it's a necessary.
But you know what I would say
evil
though,
for the
Cameron,
ministry.
and this is kind of what we always did, especially when the years that we were in student ministry, but even in pastoring too, is that our ministry time was our family time. You know, we didn't compartmentalize. This is church time and this is family time.
Yeah.
It was all family time. So our kids grew up going to student ministry events, hanging out, in student ministry, spending their summers at camp and like doing all of those things. And so we never neglected or kept them away from, when Dad had to be there and Julie had to be there to help me, and man, the kids were just there. Mm-hmm. And other moms helped take care of our kids while we served and did what we could with the students. And so our kids were always around it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we have to be careful of separating. And I'm not saying that you're talking about this, but when I separate like family time and job time, you really can't do that in the ministry because ministry time is so consuming. Mm. So you've got to combine the two. Now, what I found is that when I came to Lifeway, the one thing that Julie missed more than anything is that she was not a part of my ministry.
Yeah.
Because it was much more corporate. I went down to a big building and had meetings and corporate responsibilities, and sure, we did camp in the summer and stuff, but it wasn't like she wasn't going to come to Lifeway and hang out with me during the day.
Right.
And so she felt very disconnected from me and my ministry, and she didn't like that at all. Like that wasn't a happy time because it was fine, but I'm saying for her it was just much different.
Yeah.
And then once we got back and I think my kids were the same way. I think my kids always enjoyed, well, except for Cole, who wanted me to do something different, But anyway, for the most part, all of my kids, Cole included, enjoyed the fact that I was the pastor, or I was the student pastor, I was their student pastor, and we all got to hang out and they all got to be a part of it. And that's just how they grew up. Mm-hmm. They will tell you, man, we grew up doing this. And so I think that's how you have to do it. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you this, and I'll say this to anybody out there. Don't get into the ministry if your spouse isn't going to support you in ministry. Because I'm telling you, man, you don't want to fight that battle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because now you want to talk about tension, bro.
Yeah.
You've got the calling of the Lord in your heart, and you're passionate for it, and you want to pursue all these things, and you can't. Mm-hmm. And it's just hard. It's tough. And I know there's situations where like people, maybe get saved after they've been married, or even get a call of ministry after they've been married. And I think you've got to walk through that gingerly and tenderly with your spouse because, maybe they didn't sign up to be a pastor's wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, the Lord walks you through that, but I firmly believe that the Lord, if he calls the husband, he's going to call the wife too.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that because how can that not be true if the Bible says the two become one flesh?
Yeah.
So if the two become one flesh, then how in the world can God call the one flesh to serve him and not call both? Yeah. Right? So, so I think there are those things I think that can make it easier, make it difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
Circling back to the question, we rabbit trailed just a little, which was very, very beneficial in advocating for a salary increase, if you work additional hours or whatever. When I first started in ministry here, my role kind of shifted over the years, and kind of got to a point long before you, Jeff, where there was just a balance that needed to be a little more balanced. There was just a shift that needed to happen. And so I just had to prayerfully consider my words. And I think that's key when you're asking for a salary increase in any capacity, whether it's corporate or school, I think was the question. Just considering the motive behind the ask is key.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, when I approached my superior here, he was honestly just embarrassed that my situation had gotten to that point. And it was rectified the next week. Now, did I come in asking for quadruple? No. This is happening. These are the hours I'm working. It is grossly imbalanced.
Yes.
And it was rectified, and he was grateful. Because for me, if I had not approached or addressed that situation, I think bitterness would have set up in my heart.
Yeah.
And, getting that fixed, again, it wasn't astronomical, but it was enough, and it was fair. And like you said, we do the work, and we go above and beyond. So for me, I felt perfectly justified in asking for that. So I think it's just situational.
To your defense, though, you were doing a lot of things that people either didn't know you were doing, or you were just doing them,
Right.
and you were not getting compensated for those.
Right.
You were doing things at a professional level that would have cost a whole lot of money to have done. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have to be careful that we're not recognizing those things. Because when you're asking for work to be done, that's outside of somebody's scope of responsibility. Mm-hmm. Then that should be. It's just the right thing to compensate somebody for that. And that's one of the things I recognized early. After the fact was that wait a minute, this is not really. But you're doing this, and so how's that working?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just choosing to do it. But that's not right. That's not right. We have a responsibility to that. Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, I think what you said is exactly right. But your situation is probably a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because you were doing things that, you were writing plays, and you were creating things that would have been very, that would have cost a lot of money to have done outside the house if that was the case. That's where we got to be careful. So I'm glad you brought that up because here's what we can be guilty of, and so can other people. Man, don't take advantage of the people just because they're good.
Yeah.
Right. Here's the.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Just in the secular world too, like you mentioned, the make yourself more valuable. Well, the human tendency is, thanks for making yourself more valuable, but now I'm going to pay you less to do more. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is hard. And that's where you really have to trust the Lord, in that somebody's going to recognize your value. And, but we, as on the other side, where you're maybe supervising or employing somebody, like just because somebody's good, don't mean you can keep tasking them with jobs to do because they're good, they're faithful, especially in the church, they love the Lord. So you're not going to say no.
Yeah.
Man, that's on us. Like that's on people that lead and supervise. Mm-hmm. Like you can't do that. You can't give somebody. It's the whole concept in the children of Israel when they were in slavery in Egypt, and it's more bricks with less straw.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have a tendency to be that.
Yeah.
And that's where we've got a responsibility to people to do the right thing.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned on Sunday, and we talked about this a little while ago too, but if someone asks you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles. Yeah. And just what that looks like for us as believers in the workplace kind of goes along with this mentality of make yourself more valuable. But even not just from a value standpoint, but just as believers, like if someone asks us to do this, we'll do twice that. Mm-hmm. So how do we balance that? Because you've had to check me at times. I have perfectionistic tendencies. And it may be I'm just trying to do a little thing, but I want it to be perfect. And so I spend way too much time on that one thing. Mm-hmm. How do we balance well, you asked me to do this, I'm going to do it even better than you asked me to do. Yeah. Yeah. Just the balance of that perfectionistic side and wanting it to be as good as it can possibly be. But also not, just that whole balance of, giving our everything, making it as good as we can do it, but also keeping that in check.
No, absolutely. And I think, like when Jesus says the things he says, like if somebody asks you to go, 1 mile, go 2. Mm-hmm. If somebody asks you for your coat, give them your cloak as well. Okay, so is he speaking literally, or is he speaking more in the aspect of this more talks about attitude than it does action. So I think it's both and not either or.
Yeah. But
I think an attitude leads to the action, right? So I think when he says, hey, somebody asked you to go 1 mile, go 2. Well, that's an attitude. I'm gonna do more, and maybe that's just my competitive nature speaking through, right? You asked me to do A, I'm going to do A plus because I'm going to show you I can do more, I can do better, whatever. But I think there's an attitude there that Jesus is saying. For example, this is how I think it's translated in the work world. Hey Cameron, hey, do you mind? I've got a meeting coming up. Could you run down to Elevate, grab us a couple coffees, and here's blah, blah. And that's not my job description. But maybe you could get one of our assistants to do that. You see, that's the attitude that's not talking about.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I don't think it's as much, man, if anybody ever used that phrase with me, yeah, but that's not my job description. Yeah, I'm going to have a flashback, dude. Like, I'm going back in Yugoslavia wrestling the Russian, man. Like, we're going at it, dude. Like, I'm going, what?
Ready to go.
Yeah, because I'm like, because our attitude should be, I read a book years and years ago. It was called like Keys to Disney or something like that. And it was talking about how Disney's so successful. One of the things that they said in that book was they have 8,000 janitors.
Wow.
And they were like, what's that mean? You can't have 8,000 janitors. He says, no, we don't actually have 8,000 people employed in that particular area.
Yeah.
But everybody employed at Disney isn't above picking up a piece of trash and putting it in the trash can.
Wow. Yeah.
So their attitude, their eyes, like when they're on, you know how you walk into the Magic Kingdom and it looks brand new every single day you walk in. Do you guys know, like on that main street that you walk in on the Magic Kingdom, they have those horse hitching posts. They're basically gold-headed horses. They paint those every night.
Really?
They paint them. There's somebody's job. They are painted every night.
Wow. Because
when you walk in, they want it for you to be just like it was brand new. I mean, it's unbelievable the detail of what they do just for that experience. Think about that. That feeds your perfectionist, like going, man, I got to start doing that, right? Like I get, but the idea is like their mentality, their attitude has to be nobody's above. Even I think Michael Eisner at the time was the guy that may have written this book. Like even he was saying, man, I'm not above picking up trash. Just because I'm the CEO of, whatever, because that's my job, right? That's my passion for this place. So I think that's what Jesus is saying when he says, man, 1 mile, go 2. It doesn't matter what it is, man, I'm on the team. What do I need to do? I'm a team player. And I think that is the attitude that people look for. Christians should have that because I'm not serving you, I'm serving the Lord.
Yeah.
And can I get to the point to where, well, some people say, what if you've got a boss that you don't like? Well, you ought to love your boss. Because the Bible says your boss is Jesus. Work as though you're working into the Lord, not into man.
Right.
Because I think he says that because you're going to have people that you don't get along with, you don't like them, they're just pagans, whatever. You're going to have that.
Yep.
So I can't let that deter me from accomplishing what Christ has called me to accomplish in doing honest work, for example. So I think from the perfectionistic tendency that wants to go and like it needs to be a 7. And you're going to make everything a 10. And I think that's just where you got to have people in your life that help you balance that. Because I would much rather, but here's the thing, I would much rather pull a 10 back to a 7 than try to get a 4 to a 7. Right? So I don't need a bunch of people producing 4 that I got to keep pushing to produce a 7.
Yep.
I want people who feel like they got to produce 10s every time they stand up to the plate and pull them back.
Yeah.
We can do that, right? That's what we need. I need people that I got to say, hey, listen, just like I've had to do this with both of you guys. You need to go home. You really don't need to come in the morning. You've been up here all week long, whatever. Rachel, it's been VBS week. I don't need to see you on Monday.
Yep.
Okay? Will, you just took a bunch of kids to camp, dude. You know what I'm saying? And they're right back here.
Yep.
They're not, disappearing for 2 days. And I'm going, hey, where are you, man? What's going on? That's what you want,
Yeah.
So I think again, and it's an attitude. And of all people, we should be demonstrating that.
Yeah, for sure.
But what if we demonstrated that in the secular world? Like, to me, I just think, and maybe I'm just simplistic and that's just the way I see things, but it just makes sense to me that if you had people that are doing this kind of work in secular places and their bosses are going, what's happening? Like, what are you doing? Man, okay. And at some point they're going to go, like, who taught you this work ethic? Like, where'd this come from in you?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you asked that. You see the Bible, you know what I'm saying? It leads so naturally right into a conversation.
Yep.
That's evangelism.
Yeah.
We can't evangelize because we're poor employees. Like, how can we lead somebody to Christ in our workplace when we're not willing to do honest work?
Yeah.
So it all ties together.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last question they asked, kind of getting back to New Testament and Jesus and all that, but what did Jesus say about stealing in the Bible? Kind of applying Old Testament laws and how we should follow Jesus. What did Jesus say about stealing in the Bible?
Yeah, I read that and I thought about that because it's not really one that he referenced back in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, I know it says do not steal, but I think he kind of goes back to that whole attitude of just trust and trusting him. Mm-hmm. And I think that really comes down to, like, that's why I kind of, and I think the Lord kind of led me to that area in Malachi of, will a man rob God? Because, when we think about being a thief, or, that's kind of where the title of the sermon came from,
Mm-hmm.
None of us would think that there would be a thief in the house Sunday morning. But at the end of the day, if we're not doing honest work and we're not really demonstrating that God is our provider, and the cool thing that I really got to on Sunday morning, I hope I was able to communicate it, is what we're robbing God of is not dollars and cents.
That's right.
Like he needs that. I think it's hilarious that we think he needs our money. We're robbing him of his privilege of being our provider.
Yeah.
And you say, why don't I just be? Because he wants us to trust him.
Yep. And
when we trust him, that's what Malachi 3 is all about. When we trust him, then he opens up the floodgates of heaven. And it can sound prosperity if you're not careful. It's not about that at all.
Yeah.
Because his provision in our life is not just financial.
Yep.
Man, it's opportunity. It's blessing in our family. It's blessing in our kids' lives. It's just so many blessings that can come from him to us when we're looking to him as our provider.
That's right.
But when we're looking to ourselves and we're clinging to the things of the world and we're hanging on to it, I just think he says, I can't work inside that. You're blocking me out. You're robbing me. You're robbing me of what I want to do for you.
Yeah.
I want to be your provider. And I want to show you how faithful I am.
Yeah. But
you're not letting me. You're robbing me from that. So, we hear that phrase, and all of a sudden we go, here we go, tithing sermon. Here it goes. Well, I think our giving and our generosity is a part of us trusting God. Yeah. It's just we're trusting God, and that's why I don't think it's a percentage or it's any of that. I do think it's regular. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that we should do as a discipline in our life. I think it's something that we should do that is marked and we know it, and we're sharing it with our kids, and we're saying, hey guys, listen, mom and dad do this because this is what God's given us to live on, but we're going to give it back, a portion of that back to him because we trust him as our provider. Yep. So I want you all to watch and see how God provides for us. Man, what a great lesson for our kids. Yeah. Not just, here we go, write the check, you get the check, got the check. Why do we do that? Because preacher said we're supposed to. Yeah. Man, you're missing the whole concept. Yep. So I think that's just that, like, God wants to do so much for us. Yep. And we keep him from being able to do that. Yeah, for sure. That's good. It's been great. Just like the other ones, you could take it at face value. Don't steal. Okay. Yeah. Got it. But I love the questions, kind of self-reflection questions that you had at the end of the message. Am I willing to be an honest worker? Am I willing to recognize my role as a steward and not an owner? Mm. And am I willing to begin giving on a regular basis to remind me that God is my provider? And really, that's what it all comes down to. God's given us unique gifts and abilities and jobs and money and kids. Yeah. Like, he's given us all this to be used for his glory and to be used
to go and make disciples, what we've been called to do.
Right.
And so are we relying on him for our lives, or are we seeing these things that we have as our possessions that we get to benefit from, or are they things that he should be receiving back from us? So
and how are we going to respond when we get to heaven and we look around and we see our inheritance and we go, you mean I held on to that? and I didn't realize this was really it.
Yep.
And I could have used that to get more people here.
Right.
You know, and that's so hard because that's so, it seems so, ethereal instead
Distant,
of real, but it is real. And that's what we have to try to communicate to people.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.